Well, hello my peeps and welcome back to the channel. Now, the humble meatball. Everybody on this planet has had one, I believe, in some form. Whether that be beef or pork, turkey, veal, maybe even a vegan meatball, they come in so many different shapes and sizes. There's no way we'd be able to cover even a fraction of all the meatballs out there, but I tried my best to pick 4 delicious, incredible looking meatballs. And today we will be putting them head to head and see which one comes out on top. Will that be Gordon Ramsay's traditional Italian meatballs, or Chef Emma Bengtsson's Swedish meatballs? Or maybe Not Another Cooking Show's tiny little Abruzzo meatballs? Or these incredible looking Greek Keftedakia meatballs from Chef Ken? Leave your predictions down in the comments section below, and let's get right into this one. For the simple fact that these are probably the most common type of meatballs, at least here in the US, and especially the most familiar to me, we will be starting with Gordon Ramsay's Italian meatballs. I acquired some white wine, olive oil, plain breadcrumbs and flour, some milk, and chopped San Marzano style tomatoes, fresh garlic and parsley, ground pork, ground beef, an onion, salt and pepper, a fresh red chili and pecorino cheese, and then just some fresh oregano and basil. I'm not quite sure how it has taken me this long to do a meatball episode, especially with how popular of a food item this is. Now that I think about it, I can't remember a time I've done any kind of meatball ever. Actually, I did do that monstrosity that was the spaghetti stuffed giant meatball, but maybe I purposely put that out of my head. But I'm thinking maybe that the reason that I haven't done a video like this is because this is just one of the most familiar foods to me. Growing up, basically every single Sunday, we had Sunday dinners with spaghetti and meatballs, whether they were made by my mother, by my grandmother, who still makes some of the best meatballs ever. This stuff is practically flowing through my veins at this point. I mean, I just lived off of and inhaled meatballs already. But Gordon's version from Hell's Kitchen starts with a very simple moisture-providing flavor base that consists of some breadcrumbs and milk. Of course, our ground pork and beef, equal parts of those two, some freshly grated garlic, chopped parsley, some of that pecorino cheese, and a little bit of salt and pepper too. Over the years, I've learned that a good practice when mixing meatballs is to kind of use a level of aggressiveness right in the middle of a sausage and when forming a burger. You don't want to overmix it and emulsify it so firmly that it turns up like a sausage, but you don't want it falling apart either, somewhere in the middle. Basically, as soon as all my components look like they're evenly dispersed, I feel like that's a good time to stop. I then formed them in about 7 equally sized meatballs, got a nice brown coating on the outside. I feel like this is a very important step. A little dusting of flour really helps with this too, and then you just combine the two, the meatballs and the sauce, and let them finish cooking in the oven. This is as standard and as middle of the road as you can get, in my opinion. With the exception of maybe the chili and the sauce, this is almost exactly how I would prepare some meatballs. I probably would have just sprinkled a few dried chili flakes in my sauce and maybe a Parmesan rind if I had that around. You could stick an immersion blender in this thing if you want your sauce a little bit more smooth, but I don't really care. These things look incredible. I can already feel this is gonna be a good day, so let's give these a shot. All right, Gordon, let's see what you got for us this time. Early observations are good. That sauce is quite chunky though, which is not a bad thing. I don't mind a chunky sauce. It's just not what I'm used to. How about a little squish test, since the internet loves that? It might be hard to tell on camera, but these are unbelievably soft and supple and just super satisfying in the mouth. They have the slightest bit of bite, but they're so tender. It almost disintegrates in your mouth after a bite or two. And then what you're left with is just super tasty, flavorful. I love the browning on the outside. All that pork adds so much fatty richness, which of course is cut with this very acidic but very tasty tomato sauce. I would be very happy with this. From any relative, any Italian restaurant, this was a very good place to start. But I am very excited to try everything else on the slate today. Next up today, we've got these mouth-watering Swedish meatballs as made by Chef Emma Bengtsson over on the Munchies channel. For those, you will need some milk and beef stock, panko breadcrumbs and heavy cream, ground pork, lingonberry jam, and some Dijon mustard, ground beef and butter, allspice, salt and pepper, and an egg. Immediately after I had all my ingredients up on the cutting board and checked in the camera to make sure everything was in focus, I noticed something weird about the allspice. This label and packaging seemed very old. I have not seen this McCormick label in a minute, and when I checked the date, it expired in 2009. So that's what I get for getting spices out of my mom's spice cabinet, I guess. And just for the fun of it, I peeked up in there again to see if I can find anything else, and I found a 2007 nutmeg. And I believe spices last for years when you first buy them, which means this was probably made in 2004 or 5, so it's probably older than a lot of you. Mother, immediately after this video, you and I are going to be going through that pantry. But for this one, I started with my sauce. All told, this is gonna be reducing and simmering off for well over an hour, maybe an hour and a half. Because to my surprise, it is a very simple combination of just some beef stock, or veal stock if you have that, and heavy cream that gets reduced down to about 1/3 of its starting mass, and then finished with a little bit of the jam, and that's it. There's no herbs, there's no other butter or dairy, there's no other flavoring agents, so I'll be curious to see how this one comes out. I forgot to mention at the beginning of this one, but I did make the decision to omit all the other sides and accoutrement that went along with these meatballs. For this one, that would have been a homemade mashed potato and some freshly pickled veggies, just because that's not what we're comparing today. I didn't want to get sidetracked with comparing different starches like pasta or mashed potatoes or even salads. I want to keep the focus simply on the meatball and its adjacent sauce. Another thought I had when I was forming and cooking off all of my meatballs are, do people in Sweden just call these meatballs? And do Swedish people even eat these at all? Are they authentically Swedish? Is it like a French fry situation where they aren't actually French? You guys let me know if anybody out there can attest. By the end of this, I was pretty happy overall. I think some of the meatballs got a little bit dark just because I wanted to make sure they were cooked all the way through. A little pink is fine, completely raw is not. But I paired them up with my sauce, and it is now time to try our second balls. I swear it's been less than 5 minutes and basically all the sauce has dumped off of these. I know some of you might not believe me, but I promise. I'm assuming it would thicken up over time. Both of these components were still extremely hot. I do wish it was a little bit thicker though, just so they stayed a little bit more coated. These are very good. Some of the best Swedish meatballs I've ever had. They have a little bit more bite than the last ones, and they have the tiniest tinge of pink in the middle, which I don't mind at all. Chef Emma actually mentioned that she enjoys that, and she kind of aims for that when she's making these. And the sauce is good. I did enjoy it, but it's a lot sweeter than I was expecting. There's not a whole lot going on with that besides the sweetness and the fact that it is incredibly rich. I'm assuming these are incredibly traditional and authentic, but my taste buds are kind of screaming for a little bit more complexity. Maybe a shot of liquor of some kind, either cognac or some additional brightness with white wine, some fresh herbs. Again, very good. I would eat these any day happily, but for right now, I think I gotta keep the first ones on top. The third ball on our itinerary today are these cutest little Abruzzo style meatballs from Steven of Not Another Cooking Show. You will need some olive oil and plain breadcrumbs, ricotta and whole peeled tomatoes, spaghetti and ground veal, more pecorino cheese and salt and pepper, ground beef, fresh parsley, fresh garlic, an egg, and some basil. Literally not 5 minutes later, after I went on a whole rant as to how I was choosing to omit all the sides and pastas and mashed potatoes, I whipped out a box of spaghetti for this one, and the reason is because these things are gonna be so tiny. I feel like it would be weird and uncommon to eat these like cereal off a spoon and just have a mouthful of the balls. As a result, I did elect to include the pasta just for this one, but I'm not going to be focusing on that. Those are just going to be the vessel in which they are sitting on and will be delivered into my mouth with. The base for this one started very similar to Gordon's, a lot of standard ingredients. The part that wasn't standard was forming them with this little melon baller. That part was miserable. I wanted to pull my hair out by the end of it. I think it took me about 35 to 40 minutes to do them all. But once they were formed, I did very much like the rest of the preparation. They're all gonna get browned off as best as you can get them. I blended up my tomatoes to get them nice and smooth, and once all the balls had some browning, you add some fresh garlic and basil, deglaze everything with those tomatoes, and just let this simmer away on the back burner until your pasta's ready or until you're ready to eat. I will say, I kind of realized that over the years, I subconsciously start with a higher standard and more of a critical view of recipes like this when there's a step that feels so monotonous and boring and potentially unnecessary. I do start with a little bit of a negative bias. As much as I try not to, I just feel like it has to justify to me why we have to do the steps that we did. But after another couple minutes of boiling my pasta, combining everything in another pan, just finished with some butter, fresh basil, and some more of that cheese. It is time to give this a try. Admittedly, it looks really good. I do kind of wish I could include the spaghetti in my evaluation, but this is all about the meatballs, as we know, so let's give the third one a try. Even with how much knowledge I know Steven has, and how much research I know he does, I'm still a little bit nervous if this is authentic or not. Italians out there, just know that it is not me calling this authentic, I'm just the messenger. So this is very good. It's very comforting to me. It's extremely familiar. It tastes almost exactly what I grew up eating. The sauce is very standard. I do feel as if the pasta was necessary just as a vessel for this dish. But the meatballs, while tasty, I kind of struggle to find the justification for making them this small. It does not add or subtract anything other than time making them. I guess it's kind of cool and different to get multiple of them in one single bite and get them down this small. But if you wanted pieces of meat this small, just cut a normal sized meatball in quarters or eighths. If anything, I'd actually argue that they're so small that they become susceptible to overcooking and drying out. They lose that moisture factor in the middle. So would I be happy with these in a restaurant, or if somebody else made them for me? Yes, of course, they're very tasty. Would I ever make them again? Probably not. Unless I made some kind of crazy misstep or oversight, you guys can let me know if you think I'm missing the point. And lastly on the slate today, we've got another newcomer on the channel. It is Ken's Greek Table and his Keftedakia Greek-style meatballs. For these, I collected some olive oil and a cucumber, Greek yogurt and dried oregano, lots of fresh dill and dried mint, fresh parsley and a lemon, a yellow onion, ground beef, an egg, garlic, and salt and pepper. Once again, that ingredient list is a good representation of what we are truly testing here today. Some kind of ground meat, seasoned with salt and pepper, onion, and garlic, and that's your blank slate. All of the rest of the seasonings that have gone into our meatballs have been completely different, as well as all of our sauces, and this is probably the most different one yet. I whipped up a batch of tzatziki from our good old buddy Chef John of Food Wishes. Based on my very limited knowledge, this was a recipe that looked very classic, very simple and easy. And if you don't already know, it's basically 95% Greek yogurt, and then loaded up with some grated cucumber, lots of fresh dill, freshly squeezed lemon juice, salt and pepper, and some garlic. I did let that set in the fridge overnight to let all those flavors kind of permeate the yogurt, and the next day I got over to the meatballs. There was a few different reasons I was very excited to get into this one. The first one being, we've never done a recipe from Ken. All his Greek foods look super legit and very delicious. Another reason is recently I've become obsessed with Greek food. We recently discovered a really good Greek restaurant near me. I've gone multiple times within 1 week. I've fallen in love with basically everything I've tried there, all the different dips, whether that be the spicy feta or the tzatziki, of course, all the souvlaki dishes I've tried. I found this spinach spanakoporizo, if I've said that right. I love that thing too. So yeah, I am very excited to try this one out. But also lastly, because once we've got our very heavily seasoned meatball mix ready to go and formed in our balls, we're basically deep frying these. And spoiler alert, if you didn't already know, to my knowledge, the vast majority of restaurants, especially Italian restaurants in the US, just throw their meatballs in the deep fryer. If I had to guess, that's probably because they cook very evenly, they get a really even and dark, deep golden brown around the outsides. And most importantly, as long as you don't cook these things to hell, they come out super moist. These things should be the juiciest meatballs we've made so far today. They only took about 5 minutes total in that oil. I think I had my burner slightly above medium. I'm not sure the temperature on that. But once I got those plated up alongside our tzatziki and a lot more fresh dill, my mouth was just pooling with saliva. I have a lot more thoughts that I'm gonna hold on to for now because it is time to try our fourth and final meatball. That right there, my friends, is a very good looking plate. I was beginning to think it might not happen today, but I am blown away by these. Easily the best on the day. This is easily the most tasty and flavorful meatball around, and I'm assuming because of the way we cooked it, essentially deep fried it, they are unbelievably juicy. I mean, the thing's just dripping down my hands. And of course, with the addition of this tzatziki, this is to die for. I resorted to eating like a caveman. I don't care. I think this pairing works so well because these are so rich and so fatty and juicy, and it's perfectly cut by how bright and acidic and deliciously pungent this is with all that fresh lemon and dill. Wow. I am begging you, please make these things if you've got the time. This is gonna become a staple in my house for sure. I can't get over how juicy these are. God damn. 10 out of 10, the winners of today. Great job, Ken.
With the M without the AD. Flipping burgers and my money super lazy. Try and make a meal tonight, they ain't paying me. Try and supersize my life with my 18. Yeah, our style wasn't wavy, but we had a vision.